Hello, everybody. Welcome to View from the Post. This is a podcast made by pickleball referees for pickleball players. And the purpose of the podcast is to help players better understand the rules and some of the on-court situations that come up and the way that they can interact better with the referees. My name is Bob Swisshelm. I am a USA Pickleball certified referee. I am also happen to be one of the head ref members of the head ref team for the APP Tour.
Hello, everybody. I'm Mike Baumgartner. I am a certified referee also, and the director of officiating for the APP Tour. Thanks for joining us today.
Today, our topic is to go over the primary responsibilities of the referee in priority order. And the purpose of this is to help you understand as players what it is that the referee is doing for you on behalf of the match. And then also to help you understand what you can expect from that referee in specific situations. And we'll get to it much later, but one of the common things is you may expect that one of the primary responsibilities of the referee is to deal with line call appeals. It is a very important responsibility, but you'll find out that from a priority perspective, there are a number of other things that are more important for the referee to be focused on, which is why very often when you ask, "Hey, ref, did you see that?" you may get a response that makes you a little bit less than happy. So we're going to talk through some of that to help you understand some of the things that they're going through. So although we're not going to show you the list, just to let you know that this particular list is comes straight from the USA Pickleball Officiating Handbook, which is the Bible or the best practices that any credentialed referee is going to get trained upon and get evaluated upon. So we're going to be working through there's a list of 11 different priorities, and although we are not really going to number them for you, we are going to work through them in order. So the first thing that is the responsibility of the referee is to interpret and enforce the rules and to make sure that the play that occurs or that the match is officiated fairly and consistently using all of the rules. And so it is reasonable for you to expect the referee to know the rules relatively backwards and forwards. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, Bob, that makes perfect sense to me. You know, when we talk about interpreting and enforcing the rules, both sides want that to be done equally and fairly, and that is the number one priority and responsibility of a referee. The second priority and
But
responsibility for
but
a
before we
referee.
move on to that, though,
Mhm.
I do want the fun thing about these conversations is that
Yeah, go ahead, Bob.
there may be a perception amongst the players that the referees are out to get players. And that is hopefully, we try to beat that out of people. And occasionally you see that as people come up through the training ranks. But the focus is on the fair enforcement of those rules. And so we train the referees to be impartial, to be professional, and to understand those rules and apply them fairly. Now, when you are on the opposite side of that and you have done something where you are getting called on a rule violation, it may feel like the referee's job is to catch you up on those things. But that's not true. That's not true. We want the rules to be enforced, but we don't really want to get involved in that match. We want the match just to go smoothly. We just basically want to be a spectator and from the best seat in the house and watch it. We're not looking for opportunities to get into it, but we are prepared to step in when necessary.
Yeah, again, spot on, Bob. It's sometimes I always make the comment, or I've made the comment several times that if the referee is going to be uh 100% wrong 50% of the time. So one of the teams is not going to be happy with a rule that may need to be enforced. But to be fair to both sides, you have to enforce the rule properly. And like you said, some players get upset about that, teams get upset about that. But if you didn't enforce the rule properly, guess what? The other team's going to get upset as well, right? So the rule is the rule, the procedure is the procedure, and the number one priority of a referee is to ensure the rule is properly and fairly distributed.
And one of the things that another thing that we train people on is that if you bend the rules a little bit because you think it might be fair or appropriate in the situation, we help the referee realize that what you're doing is I'll use the word cheating, but you are placing the opponent at a disadvantage because that opponent should expect that we enforce those rules fairly. So if we bend the rules to accommodate a situation that we feel uncomfortable with, we may be helping that player, but we are helping that player to the detriment of the other player, and that is inappropriate, unfair, unprofessional. And so we try to help our referees as we train them understand that it is important for us to be relatively rigid in terms of that. Now, having said that, if you understand the rule book, you'll understand that there are situations where there are referee discretion involved, and those are fine. But when it's clear cut in the rule book that this is what happens, uh, then we need to follow those consistently for fairness.
Yeah, I agree. All right, you ready for number two now, Bob? All right. So number two, accurately record the match on the score sheet. There's nothing worse than at the end of the match, a referee turns in a board to the operations group and something's wrong. You know, the wrong team has somehow won the match. So, as a referee, we're trained to accurately record the match on the score sheet to the point that we need or we require or we ask that the winning team signs the score sheet at the end of the match. So when we ask for that, we're asking you to validate that our score sheet is correct. If you just pencil whip it and we turn it in and it's wrong, then we have an issue. That falls back on the referee uh, because they didn't govern the score sheet the way they should have. But for us to ensure that we're accurately keeping score, we're accurately doing side outs, it's all part of ensuring that the player experience uh, and the confidence in the referee is there.
So, how hard is that, Mike? I mean, it's just writing down the score, right? Where do we have to
Yeah,
train people on
seemingly
that?
it's yeah, seemingly it's just writing down the score, right? But it all starts in the pre-match briefing by understanding who's your starting server. That's why we ask you who's your starting server, and that it's identified on the score sheet. And then we understand, who wants to start at what end, all through the coin flip, right?
And how
So
does the referee know how to do that?
so through the training that they get from USA Pickleball, of course, right?
Right.
So it's all part of the training that basically from day one, you're taught how to do this.
Uh, There's
There,
this wonderful
most
thing
players,
called an officiating handbook, right?
yeah, right, right. Most players probably don't notice it, but there's a particular way that the scorecard has to go on the clipboard and the way the clipboard has to rotate every time there's a side out. And hey, when there's an end change, now it gets really complicated where you got to make sure that you're marking who the current server is, what the score is, you're flipping your board and your sheet or however you want to do it the right way to ensure that the board is lined up properly at an end change. There's a lot that goes on mechanically with the score sheet and the scoreboard that a lot of people don't even recognize. And the issue with that is if a referee doesn't know what they're doing and they're not doing it properly, then number two is violated right away.
I remember a couple years ago, a friend of mine was an avid player, and then she said that, well, hey, I'm a good referee. Okay, fine. And then I found her, I ran across her in a tournament, and she refereed a match. Okay, fine. And then so I looked at the score sheet, and I thought, oh, this is horrible. Because as you say, there's a very clear set of procedures and processes that we expect to use. One of the things that we like to be able to say is that if we, for whatever reason, need to replace a referee in the middle of a match, we need to be able to do that quickly, and we need to be able to have the referee A give the score sheet over to referee B and have the referee B be able to pick up right from the match. And so that's the key aspect of that is that every single referee follows the best practices and how they accurately record that match on the score sheet. We've got this thing called score sheet reconstruction. How many of you as players have ever challenged the referee? Say, wait a minute, you called the score wrong, and that happens, and maybe that is the case. But you say, no, 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 the score is 5-4-2. And then you have this conversation with the referee, points at the score sheet and says, no, no, see how we came in at two. So that meant that your even server, your banded server was the first server. And now here's where so they're using their score sheet to help make sure that they know what they're doing and that they can actually explain it to you when you have a question. It is very, very key.
Yeah, score sheet reconstruction, it takes a little bit of time to understand how to do it, but if everybody is, using the best practices the way they're supposed to, it can be done pretty quickly. Let's talk about this particular item in a non-refereed match, Bob. How important is it at the end of the match that the players understand the best way and the right way to recording information or the final score on the score sheet?
It's very important. I just refereed. I was head ref or a referee coordinator for a match that was mostly unofficiated. So one of the things that we do, we make morning announcements, and then also when we do these the concept of a match starter, we spend time with each of those players to help them understand how they need to record the final scores. They're not keeping track of the scores throughout the match, but we remind them, hey, when you take a timeout or in between games, please write down those scores before you break. Because when you come back, I can't tell you the number of times that I've been called in because there's a dispute about, well, wait a minute, the score was this at the beginning of whatever. The other thing is, and this is probably where you were going, Mike, is that it's incredibly important at the end of the match to make sure that the both opponents agree upon what that score is, who the winner is, and that you have the winner gets the loser, sorry to use that term, to initial it so that they confirm that those are the results. Because as soon as that score sheet gets back to operations, it's going to get entered into the system. And if it's wrong and it has to be backed out again, that can create some major disruption in the flow of the tournament.
Yeah, and I will say most players do a really nice job of this. Sometimes they really don't understand, and they'll bring it up to the ops table and say, "Hey, can you help me fill this out?" And that's okay, but that defeats the idea of the other team validating what you've
Right.
turned in,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
It- One thing I do want to go back on here is when we're in a when you're playing in a non-officiated match, I see it all the time. I'm not sure why, but people don't wear the starting server bands. Those starting server bands are there for a purpose. Very quickly, let's touch on that. Okay.
Sure. Sure.
Uh, you know, we, the starting server bands are there to identify who the starting server is. And most of the time, you're not going to have any issues with that. Even if you don't wear them, you're not going to have any issues. But it's that time that you do have an issue or a discrepancy that now you need to call out somebody to work through a situation. And if we don't know who the starting server is, it's difficult for us as referees to walk that back. First thing we're going to ask you if you don't have bands on who's the starting server,
So
and
let's
then we're
let,
going to
let's
ask
take
several
even a
other
further
questions.
step back too. There's two phrases inside pickleball: starting server and first server. So the starting server is the person who is identified with a band. Each team has one and only one starting server. That is the person who, when their score is even, they should be serving or receiving on the right side. The first server is the person who happens to be on the right at side out, and they are the person who will serve first in a doubles match because they serve from the right side. So um, I used
based
to
on
think.
score, based on score.
Yeah, based upon their score.
That
So
side out. Yeah.
I used to think that the starting server band was primarily there for the referee, and occasionally I would forget to bring them, and I'd have to go scramble them. And I there was one player actually says, "No, I want the starting server band because it helps me remember as a player where I am supposed to be." And now, having said that, it's less significant than it used to be because it used to be a fault if you were out of position and the
Right.
referee would not correct you. Now the referee will correct you, and if everybody gets it wrong, and at the end of the rally you realize that you're out, it's that rally stands, so it's less significant. But still, we want, in terms of that, interpreting and enforcing the rules and applying them fairly, we want the right configuration of the rally to have to play out. So if the wrong person is serving from the wrong side, then that is not the way that the game was intended to be played.
Yeah, you know, it's particularly important when you're stacking or playing a team that is stacking, right? With or without a referee, it can become quite confusing to some players if those bands aren't on. Sorry, I got a little sidebar there, but I wanted to make sure we talked about the starting server bands and how
That's the
important they
beauty of
were
this
to.
particular bantering back and forth that we can do that. And
Yeah.
our original plan, and maybe we'll get to it, was to go through all of those responsibilities. But the other thing that we've talked about is we want to keep these things relatively short. So just to warn, fair warning to everybody, we may at the end of our 10-minute conversation here say, "Well, we got through number five. Let's do a break, and then we'll come up and do the next one." We're making this up as we go along.
So let's roll into number three then,
I
Bob.
would
Go
say the
ahead.
next one is that the referee is the person who is responsible for announcing the correct score for each rally. I can't tell you the number of times when we go through and we are the first time. I happen to be the first referee that they've ever had, and I'm getting ready to call the score, and the player calls the score because they're so used to it, right? That's not a fault. That's not a problem. You can do that. And I had one time I had a player that after I called the score, they wanted to call the score because they were so used to it. Their opponent objected to it, said, "No, as long as he calls the score and serves within 10 seconds, that's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with that." So we are responsible for announcing the correct score for each rally. Now, from a test question to you, Mike, if you're a player and
Uh-oh.
I'm calling the
Uh-oh.
score, when can you get yourself in trouble?
Oh, if I'm calling the score, when can I
I'm
get
calling the
myself?
score. I'm the referee and you're the server, and I'm calling the
Oh,
score. How can you get yourself in trouble?
yeah. So if I serve, if I strike the paddle to the ball during the calling of the score, it is a fault on me.
Right.
If I serve prior to the start of calling of the score by the referee, then it is a replay.
All right. All right.
There's a lot a lot of people that don't understand the difference right there. So if Bob Swisshelm has already started calling the score and Mike Baumgartner serves, that is a fault. If Mike Baumgartner serves before Bob starts calling the score, that is a replay.
Yep. All right. Next.
All right, so this is one that number four, speak clearly and audibly.
Audibly
Real
enunciate,
nice, Mike.
use the correct pronunciation of the word.
Use a clear, distinct, and measured cadence when making calls and announcements. This is a really important um, priority for a referee. It just creates confusion when the referee's not speaking loudly, they're not speaking clearly. And as a player, if you feel that that's happening, you know, don't be afraid to say, "Hey, ref, I can't hear what you're saying," or "Hey, I'm not real sure what you're saying." I've been asked several times to repeat the score. When I get to 13 and 14 and the score, 13 and 14 sound the same to some people, and they don't think I'm calling the score correctly. So it's okay. I'm not upset by it. Just ask me, and I'll correct myself in what I'm doing. So yeah, make it clear to the referee that you're not sure if they're not doing number four.
Many of us got into this particular vocation because we like to speak loudly. The joke I make is that well, when I first learned how to play pickleball, I had a minor injury, and so I was on the sidelines and I was watching pickleball videos, and I saw this person that was standing off on the sideline playing around with a clipboard, following all of those processes that we talked about earlier. But occasionally they get to yell and they get to, speak real loudly. Well, my wife constantly says, Bob, use your inside voice. Well, I found a vocation where I get to use my outside voice all the time. It's pretty cool. Um,
Yeah,
one of the things,
Michelle calls that coach voice for me. She's like,
yes.
use coach voice, or more importantly, stop using your coach voice. That's what she'll tell
So,
me.
what is the consequence of a situation where a referee kind of fumbles a little bit in how they call the score? Say I'm Bob Swisshelm and I go 5-4-2, and you, Mike Baumgartner, is the server. You've measured my cadence and you've timed your serve so that you serve immediately after I'm done because you're trying to get a little bit of strategic advantage on your opponent. But I, as the referee, change my cadence, and then because of that, I'm not done calling the score when you strike the ball. What happens in that situation?
Well, in that particular situation, referee should recognize that they've kind of fumbled through the score call and, give the player experience and professionalism to say, I'm going to recall that score. We'll start that over.
Cool. All right. Next, then our next priority is to ensure that the server and receiver are the correct players in the correct position for the rally. So we talked earlier about the concept of a first server versus the starting server, and the fact that the starting server is the person who wears the band. And when your team score is even, the serving team, the starting server should be on the right, and then if the receiving team's score is also even, their starting server should also be on the right. One of the other things that we do from a referee perspective is we have these little first and second server clips that we use during a doubles match to identify who is the first server and who is the second server, or in other words, who is the currently correct server. So we are responsible for making sure that we understand who should be where on the court so that the correct configuration of that rally plays out. So we are responsible for assuring that. Now, prior to August of 2023, we used to figure that out and hold it in the back of our head and then look up and say, okay, is this what we expect to see? But we would say nothing. And then if the server served out of position, we would call a fault. Now, kindler, gentler referee force, the now we all will actually change that. And so we'll say, hey, you need to be over there or whatever. And there was all sorts of consternation about that. Personally, I think that has been a strong benefit. It allows us to focus on play. No, one less gotcha fault, right? But we are responsible for making sure that that occurs. Um, any comments, Mike, from you on that
Yeah,
particular topic?
a couple of things, yes. So first one is people would ask, why is it so important that people are in the correct position, right? Players may ask that. Well, first of all, it's a rule that you're in the correct position. Secondly, there could be a player matchup advantage if you're not in the correct position. You could have somebody serving to somebody that you wouldn't normally want serving to based on a strategy that the team has incorporated, right? So you have to avoid that as a referee. You got to make sure that people are in the right spots so those types of things are avoided, right?
Right. The
Um,
game is designed to switch servers and receivers so that in general you're relatively even on who that you're serving and receiving to both players. If we weren't watching for this, technically somebody who was a very strong server could serve out the match
right, right.
and use that advantage inappropriately.
Yeah, so when this rule first got discussed on changing, I was dead set against it, to be honest with you. And my thought was, it's a rule. All sports have rules. Let's make players accountable for something, right? And but I was, as we've changed it and as it's been changed and as we've used it over the last year and a half or so, I am a big advocate for it. I think it's important that the match flow is sustained the way it should be. And when people are losing matches, were losing matches because they were out of position on match point, yeah, it's their responsibility to understand and be in the right spot. But that to me wasn't. I'll say I won't. I don't want to use the word fair, but it was it was a shame. How's that?
Yeah.
So anyway, let me ask you one question though, Bob. What if it's an unofficiated match? How do you handle that? How do you handle it as a player who may see uh, another team out of position, either at the serve or the receive,
So
before and
hopefully,
after?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. So before the serve occurs, you can say, "Hey, you're so and so." Now, back in the day, what used to happen is that people would use that to their strategic advantage, right?
Oh
Because
yeah,
you
yeah,
used to be able to call it a fault after the rally. So I know many people that would never tell their opponent that they're out of position, and if they as the receiver won the rally, they would just keep going. They keep going until they get to the rally that they lose. And then they say, well, wait a minute, you were out of position and therefore I win that rally. And then there's this argument that ensues. In general,
yeah,
most players hopefully should expect that, or want the matches to be played out as planned. So now today, since there's not really going to be a consequence, you don't have that advantage of calling a fault anymore. Just identify it as soon as you can. And if it's before the serve, then you get them in the correct position. You have until technically, if you 100% sure that they are out of position, you could stop the rally at any point and cause a replay. However, anytime that you stop the rally after the serve, you run a certain risk. So personally, I would suggest against it. If you happen to have caught it before the serve, then you identify it. If you recognize it after the serve and you're 100% sure, then sure, you can stop the rally and say, well, wait a minute, you're in the wrong position. Let's redo it. Otherwise, if you're not really sure, I personally suggest you just play out the rally. And then at the end of it, yeah, the wrong configuration was played, but you ran no risk in terms of stopping the rally. And then you correct it for the next rally. But there would never be in that situation a replay. Once the rally is completed, regardless of whether or not the players were in position or the correct serve or whatever, by rule, it is now done. Is that the points that
meaning that rally's played in good faith, and you
yeah,
move
and
on. You
play in
correct it,
good
move
faith
on to
and
the
it's
next
done.
rally. Yeah. Okay. All right. Hey, thanks for that explanation, Bob. Let's see. Is it me now? Number
Yeah.
6, call service, non-volley zone, short serve, and other faults. So, as a referee, we're instructed and have to call the faults that we see, right? So, uh, service faults we'll talk about in another podcast at another time because that could be a lengthy conversation. Uh, non-volley zone foot faults or service foot faults. Yeah, most definitely we need to be seeing those as a requirement and enforcing those as well. Now, I will say this, if a referee's not 100% sure that they saw it, they will not call it or should not call it. So, as a player, understand if a referee calls the foot fault or the service foot fault or any violation, they in their mind believe that they're 100% correct on what they've called, regardless of what and how you feel. So, all right.
All right. So now, oddly enough, there are 11 of these things. We are just now at six. And so maybe this is the time to say timeout, change ends. Do we want to? We've been talking for a good 15 minutes or so. You think, Mike? we need to make an executive decision. Do we want to stop this particular podcast and then pick up with the second half on another one, or should we just plow on through?
I think we should stop right here. I think that the rest of these, especially the last one, may take a little bit of time.
Right. Okay.
So
So
I think this is a good place to stop. So as you said,
timeout.
good place
Change
for me to
ins.
change. Go ahead, go through it. I'm winning.
Yes, yes, you are. All right, because you're serving. You're serving at you did number six, and so you're serving, so you must be winning. So anyway, thanks everybody for listening to this version of View from the Post. Please, if you would like to like this podcast, also subscribe to it. If you have any specific topics that you would like for us to discuss, we have a whole slew of them that we're planning on discussing already. But if there's anything specific in your mind that you want to hear from the referees about, what are you thinking when you're doing this? Please send it to view from the post, all scrunched together at gmail.com, and we will add that to our list. Any closing comments from you, Mike?
No, hey, I appreciate everybody joining us today, and hopefully what we've done so far has been helpful. Again, as Bob indicated, contact us at viewfromthepost@gmail.com whenever you'd like. Appreciate all your
All right.
time. Thank you,
And
everybody.
the next one will be the next podcast will be the continuation of the referee priorities. Thank you.